Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me and Kato for it, meowing off screen. So I'm continuing a series here. This is going to be episode 2 of 7, where I'm kind of reflecting back on lessons that I've learned over 10 years of Star Wars podcasting, because we are getting near to that 10th anniversary that's happening on July 7th. And these episodes are going to be done a little bit differently. Like the first one yesterday, I did about the notion of trust, and today the notion is going to be about scarcity, and it's going to be a little different from the regular podcast that we do, no stopping and starting. This is just me talking about scarcity and what I've learned around that idea over the course of 10 years of Star Wars podcasting. So initially, like back in the early days when I was doing this podcast, I talked about scarcity being a good thing for Star Wars. That one of the reasons why I think Star Wars is as successful as it has been, why it has been something that has lived so strongly in the imaginations of people for so many years, is because it was a comparatively rare commodity, right? It wasn't like, Star Trek, and this is not to bag on Star Trek, because I enjoyed the heck out of The Next Generation and other Star Wars or Star Trek TV series as well. Love the movies also. So yeah, I'm a Star Trek fan too, not as committed nearly as I am to Star Wars naturally, but Star Wars, I do feel like, really benefited from scarcity. I mean, it was just the 3 movies, and then briefly some cartoons and a couple of TV movies, and that was about it for many, many years. And it wasn't until the expanded universe happened with Timothy Zahn's original Thrawn novels in the early 90s that suddenly it was like, oh my God, Star Wars is a thing again. I mean, yeah, the Marvel comics were happening, but let's be honest, like the audience for comics is really, comparatively small, next to movies, right? And I think the audience is bigger for books, and then it just kind of goes down the scale per se. So there was a, dedicated core keeping interest in Star Wars alive with, new storytelling that was happening. But really the rubber hits the road in live action. It always has. That's just, that's just the way of things, and that's just the way it is for any storytelling basically. So scarcity in Star Wars live action was the thing. And then having the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, same situation. That was all scarcity. That was all like, oh yeah, we're getting 3 movies and 3 years in between movies, and yeah, it still fed that, oh my gosh, it's an event. It is an actual significant thing in our culture that's happening. And now we look at things and it's like it's not the same. I mean, they released 5 Star Wars movies in 5 years, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled that they did. Do I think that there's maybe a little bit of suffering that The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker did, because they were only 2 years apart, and that maybe the level of continuity wasn't there exactly as there was in the prequels or the original trilogy? Yeah, that's probably the case, but both of those movies really do have their merits, and I enjoyed the heck out of them anyway. And then here we are without a Star Wars movie for going on 5 years now, and it's going to be what is it? It's going to be another 2 basically. So it'll be 7 years before we get another Star Wars movie from the previous one. But in the meantime, we've had something that we never had before, which was live action television. So we've gotten seasons of The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka and Andor, and we've got The Acolyte happening now. Like, this really is pretty awesome. And yet we're Bob Iger may be right, and not necessarily in the way that we want him to be right, in the sense that it seems like Star Wars really is more compelling when it gets to be an event. And we've had so much live action Star Wars over the past 5 years. Like, it's been it's been absolutely incredible. And, Andor was just the most fantastic thing. Like, I absolutely loved every minute of it. But, is it still, still the case that scarcity helps it? I feel like it is. Like, I feel like the fact that Bob Iger has said that, they wanted to scale back production, so we're only going to get 2 live action series a year, right? So we're getting The Acolyte and then later Skeleton Crew. But even then, Skeleton Crew is barely going to make it onto the calendar this year. As much as I desperately want live action Star Wars, I feel like we get a better product when they take more time with it. It did seem to be different from Marvel. Marvel seemed to have their studio thing, at least with those first phases of the cinematic universe. They really seem to have their stuff dialed in, and phases 4 and 5 have been kind of a disappointment comparatively speaking, right? But Lucasfilm, as much as I wanted them to be dialed in for 5 movies in 5 years, it felt a little slippery, a little, rocky at times. Mandalorian was, fantastic. And the live action TV storytelling engine was, getting ramped up slowly. And that was okay. That was a good thing. And then suddenly we had, like the Book of Boba Fett in Mando season 3 and, other things like in short order of each other. And it was like, okay, maybe this is a little too much. I mean, that's how I have felt about it, I think. I would love to know what you think, whether, too much live action Star Wars is a bad thing necessarily, even if you do want it. Like, if you're catching this on YouTube, comments are right there, Spotify Q&A sections right there. Anywhere else, head over to the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com and tell me what you think. I'm at the point where I'm like, I do feel like less is more. And I also feel like, when I started this podcast, one of the things that I had been very excited about was the fact that they had rebooted the canon. And so I felt like I could hold all of Star Wars in my head again in some fashion. And they were just ramping up books again and ramping up comics again, or figuring out how they were going to do it in a new way. And even that, like, I think I've hit the point in 10 years where I feel like I am, at the place where I was in the old expanded universe, where I was like, I can't catch up on everything, and I don't know how I'm gonna. There's so many books that I haven't read that we haven't talked about on the podcast. Crimson Climb and Rise of the Red Blade, and even finishing High Republic Phase 2 and getting into High Republic Phase 3. I'm in the middle of The Living Force by John Jackson Miller. Haven't been able to finish that. I'm just picking ones off the top of my head. In the comics, like, my goodness, don't get me started there. So, it's been a lot. I don't know. And I'm starting to find that I'm pining a little bit for the days when Star Wars was a little scarcer somehow. But anyway, that's what I've got on the notion of scarcity as I've been reflecting over 10 years of Star Wars podcasting. And that's what I've got for you for the episode today. If you enjoy the show, please help me get it in front of other Star Wars fans, and you can do that. I've told you a few times how ratings and reviews and just telling people, and likes and subscribes and follows and joins, and you can even help me continue to produce this, and you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7x7. So it just remains for me to say thank you for joining me for this episode of the podcast as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.